Hey, it's Shani, and I'm back with an episode of Shani's Lab. So I want to come on here and talk about, the whole LGBTQ being taught, as a history class in schools. So, I'm gonna start off with this. So when I went to Morehouse College, when I originally left high school, I went to Morehouse College, and I remember, I had a black, well, of course I was about to say I had a black roommate, but my roommate, I was talking to him, we were discussing the topic of black history, and, he was so amazed, basically shocked by, so much information I knew, the things I was telling him, the things I was telling him to look up, and, he was, really, it was eye-opening for him. He was shocked, he was into it, and I was excited. I was happy that I could bring him, some positivity and also, some pride, in being, a black man. So he was like, we don't have class. And he was from Atlanta. And he was like, we don't have a black history class. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, no, we don't have it. And I was like, I know that, you have certain schools or certain cities across America that doesn't have a black history class. But you wouldn't think that in a place like Atlanta, where majority of its population is black, that they don't have a requirement. Like in Philadelphia, we had black people held a protest, the black people that were in schools, and they were like, if y'all don't give us the black history class, we're going to do a school, lockout, walkout, whatever. So, that's what they did. But for whatever reason, when it comes down to, black history classes, till this day, you still have schools who doesn't have that as a requirement. And now they want to teach LGBTQ as a history class, and it's going to be a requirement. But, black history or African American history is not a requirement. Also, I want to talk about the fact that what's also missing in schools, like you still have, teachers that need to be evaluated. You have classrooms that need to be reevaluated. You have the education itself that has to be reevaluated. Kids, like for example, my high school, we were still one of those old school high schools where we had majors. So, I was a business major. And when you do business, you take, I took classes like economics and business 101. We learned about, the writing checks and all that. Like, I was a business major. You had sports, you had your culinary, you had music. So, we still had majors. We had our major focus. And then we had, our electives. Like I took journalism. So, like I give good credence and definitely good shout outs to Germantown High School, which is now recently closed due to the SRC, as well as, gentrification and everything else that's going on in Philly. But, that right there shows you that, in school, all you really need is, a good focus, and some elective classes to keep you open-minded. But, trying to force kids to sit there and learn about something that they may or may not participate in one day, to me, is pointless, especially when you still have young black children who are being, robbed of, the joy of just learning about themselves and their history, and the people, that, help them get to where they are, like that's some bullshit right there. Also, when it comes down to sexual orientation, sex, and things like that, like, there's schools who don't even have sex education. They don't have, the parenting classes anymore. They've taken, just driver's ed out of schools. So, when you have schools that don't have driver's ed, they don't have, like, just a normal sexual education class, why in the fuck is the first thing that people thought of was, oh, hey, let's teach LGBTQ in schools? Like, really? What does that have to do with children's education at the end of the day? Like, like I said, math, science, English, electives, a major. Like, what are you interested in? Before you went to high school, you used to take a poll, and you would answer some questions, and it would, you basically deciding on, what you wanted to do, when you grow up. And of course you could change that if you like, but that should be entirely up to you. I just don't understand why, they feel as though that LGBTQ history, whatever that is so important that it needs to be taught to our children in schools. I'm not with this for these three reasons. One, there's still schools where black children it's not a requirement for them to have black history classes. Or two, they don't have that as an option. And three, that has nothing to do, with education itself. Like if you have a sex question or if you have questions about sexual orientation and things of that nature, those should be handled by your parents, i.e. or grandparents. No one's teacher, no one's school official should be talking to you about sexual education. Like that would be a problem for me. If my kid came home and was talking about, oh, the teacher talked about this in class. Like, what the fuck does that have to do with your education? That's not education. Or that should be left off for, like, college or, maybe senior year or whatever, but not a requirement to children. Like, they're not trying to teach us to, more molded, or older children. They want this to start early, and that's some bullshit, When they changed black history and start telling more of the truth, then maybe we could talk about some LGBTQ history. But, you know, even the way they teach Black history is fucked up. But luckily for me, you know, I had Ishmael Jimenez, and he didn't use the book. You know, he used the book sometimes, but for the most part, you know, we learn a lot about, you know, a lot of different people, inventions, just a lot of shit about Black Americans that you would have never known or, you know, got to know had you not taken that class. And it's definitely opened your eyes. That's where I figured out hidden colors. You know, that's how I found out what that was. It was, you know, through, you know, being in, you know, Jimenez class. So, you know, another thing about them wanting to teach this in schools to children is, are they trying to say that now all children are gay? I don't get it. Honestly, I don't. Like, you know, the LGBT community has not been around no more than what, maybe 40 years or so, or something like that. The actual community itself. You know, but yet and still they've gotten so much accomplished. Do you know how long it took foundational Black Americans to get, you know, seats in the Senate, to even get a Black history class, to be let into schools? You know, like they took, you know, blood, sweat, and tears. You know, like literally blood, sweat, and tears. Like that ain't no, you know, oh, I'm just saying, like it took us blood, sweat, and tears, you know, to get to the levels that we are now, you know, and they're gonna spit in our face and just, you know, throw the LGBTQ and immigrants, you know, issues all over top of us, you know, and top of us, and pretend that, you know, we just don't matter. You know, like that's not cool. Like I said, if you have a sexual orientation question, or if you know, you want to learn more about something like that nature, that should be left to your own devices, or to, you know, you talk to your parents about it. But you should not be learning about that in school, because that has nothing to do with education. Like for example, you have Black kids who do the K through 12. They go to college, get out of college, still can't find a job, still don't have proper job training. Like that's another thing. In my school, we had a student success center. We had on-job trainings. We had summer internships. Like there's a lot that has been taken away from the school systems, you know, that, you know, my generation was the last to get. You know, like I feel bad for, you know, my little cousins and people like that. Like they have to do a lot of legwork to go out and find scholarships, to, you know, start hearing about college readiness. Like all of that stuff was geared to us straight up from 9th grade. Like, you know, you had young Black professionals who just graduated. They were in the schools. They were in the success center. They would take us on college trips. They would talk to us about college and finances and things of that nature. Like, you know, they were really good. And they also understood, you know, what it took to be successful. So that's why they had them in the schools. They weren't sitting there talking about immigrant issues or, you know, LGBTQ. That has nothing to do with the fact that, you know, we need more Black doctors. We need more Black lawyers. And it doesn't matter, you know, if you're straight or gay. If you're Black, you're Black. You see what I'm saying? You know, so like I said, and it's not to say that they don't have a history, or that, you know, they shouldn't be proud of their history or whatever. But why are they trying to force this into schools? I know in Europe they've already started, and I think a couple cities in the United States are starting to adopt it. And, you know, I just don't get it. Like I said, when history itself is already being told backwards, and then you have this fucked up version of Black American history that they like to, you know, put in that says, you know, oh, you were slaves, and then the civil rights movement happened, and then freedom, and then boom. No. I'm not going to sit here and, you know, pretend like, you know, that this is cool and that, you know, oh, you know, good for them. Like, no. There's still a lot of issues in schools that has to be resolved. Like, how come kids in the city aren't learning how to drive like suburban kids do? Why don't they have the parenthood classes and things like that? Like, you know, there's a lot that they took out of the schools that should be brought back, but what people want to focus on is, you know, LGBTQ history. What about the fact that, you know, math has now become challenging? People aren't, you know, really, it's not clicking for people. Like, you know, if you talk to older generations, they'll be like, why are they teaching math like this? You know, like, I don't like the way they're teaching it. And, you know, I'm pretty sure you heard that from like an uncle or a grandma, or, you know, a real older cousin who went to college, and, you know, and they're like, why are they teaching math like this? Like, why they change it? You know, so there's a lot about education, the education system, that still needs to be dealt with. But here we are in 2019 talking about adding a history class for LGBTQ. Like, this is where we are, America. This is where we are.